James K. Polk, the 11th President of the United States, the one who led the U.S. through the Mexican-American War, which by the end of his term had acquired the Oregon Territory, the annexation of Texas, California, the disciple of Andrew Jackson, the young Hickory to his old Hickory, surprisingly is one of the lesser remembered U.S. presidents, which, you know, when I set out to like start doing the different documentaries, there was always that feeling of like, even if this person is either well known or at least known in the circles that I would think they should be known, is it to the degree that I think it is? Right? Do people know of this person in the ways that I feel that they should? So, like for example, with the Johnson documentary, there actually are some very, let's just say, lesser educated Americans who have no idea who LBJ was. But then when you add in the fact that this is also the same president that signed the Voting Rights Act, Medicare, Medicaid, food stamps, Civil Rights Act, and then suddenly it makes like no sense to not be aware of him if you were affected by these policies. With Polk, I really don't think anyone who lives in California or Oregon or Texas should not have some familiarity with him. Because of all the one-term presidents, he's probably the most successful, right, in terms of accomplishing all of his goals, also the establishment of the independent treasury, or reestablishment of it. And it's kind of wild that someone who stood at the center of such a important 4 years just kind of got thrown into the dustbin of history. But in terms of if I think doing a documentary on him is something I should do, it's less so about is there a need for it, which I think there is, and more so just kind of putting it on the back burner in terms of the other things I have lined up, where I've been over the last several weeks like going more hard on finishing the LBJ one, because we're about to reach the 2-year mark of when that started in September of 2023. I wrote the whole script for the rest of the FDR one. I just have to sit down and record and edit and all the rest of it, and I'm trying to knock out one before going on the other one. And then the Nixon one's got some parts also done. But what I was kind of curious about was just, see, Polk's another example, right, of like, I know why I think this person is important, but do I have the materials to go over it? And I had these 2 books. I have them in stores. I don't have them on me right now, that were more so about his earlier years, right? And then the issue I was going to run into was when you get to the presidency, then I'm going to have to get another book to get in for, I guess, siphon information from. But yeah, he's definitely in my top 10 U.S. presidents. And really what's interesting is that in a lot of ways, he's kind of paralleled Grant, where it used to be that you would see Polk, 50, 60, 70 years when they started doing the presidential rankings, in top 10s, right, with a lot of acclamation. Same thing with Jackson. But as time has gone on and people have really evaluated, hey, yeah, he was very forward-thinking in terms of, getting us all of this territory, which is still recognized as a very significant thing that he did. But then when you go, okay, wait, so he was a slave owner whose conflict, right, the Mexican-American War was like instigated by him and exacerbated divisions because Polk believed that people who owned slaves should be able to take them from the slaveholding state that they were in into a part of the U.S. that was banning of slavery and still own them in these other portions of the country. So basically he supported the expansion of slavery. But what's interesting is that, again, as more time has passed and people have, like, their sensibilities and values have changed, both he and Jackson, in spite of their many accomplishments in other realms, are criticized more harshly and have seen their rankings start to kind of dwindle and go down. And I can't sit here and say I don't not necessarily agree with that position, but I understand where people have become more critical of the worst aspects of these different historical figures. But for me, when I'm trying to do my whole objective importance thing, right, I'm trying to look at stuff in terms of the full scope of it. I cannot erase Polk. I can't pretend that he's, oh, well, this is a slave owner, so he's unimportant. No, Polk was one of the most important U.S. presidents that I still believe more people should be familiar with. And whether he was slaveholder, slave, supporter, whatever, it's not really, it doesn't diminish the other achievements of his. Again, I with this stuff, it is me trying to do, I don't want to call it a civil service, right? But there's still some attempt at objectivity, even if I have my own opinions and whatnot, which of course controls who I want to do and who I want to make stuff of and whatnot. But yeah, it's really, so far I'm more so interested in just how with Polk and Jackson their reputations have gone down because people have become more and more critical of their slave holding and just stances on slavery. Whereas with someone like Grant, who used to get laughed at as a joke, used to get seen as an extreme lesser figure, if in terms of presidents compared to Lincoln and in terms of generals compared to Robert E. Lee, over the last 10, 20, 30 years, Grant's reputation has gone up for his support of Reconstruction. And it's interesting just how with a lot of this stuff it's been over 100 years, but there's still these evolving opinions and positions on it where it's like as more and more time passes, even shorter spans of time, people get more defensive or on the side of various figures. But no, Polk's got a pretty interesting career. He was the Speaker of the House, the only Speaker of the House to become U.S. president. Governor of Tennessee before they threw him out of there. The dark horse candidate, I believe, was the 1844 election against Henry Clay. So he's, there's a clear and interesting story with him. Shortest post presidency of any president that didn't die in office. I think I would, because I floated the idea of doing one on Wilson, who I still would also say is very important. I would say, for me, it should go like this. I'm gonna try, the most I would have ongoing in terms of documentaries is 4. I would try to finish at least one of them before either starting on Polk or Wilson. And there's still another book I want to get on Polk before plunging into trying to make content on him. See, I think that the position that works the best for me with these is to just kind of focus on one and just do all the parts of it back to back, because that way there's less dead air and there's less reluctance, oh, it's been so long, I don't feel like going back to this. But he's up there, and he's someone who is another example of just why I get so frustrated with the American school system and what's taught in schools. This is one of the most accomplished, not only first-term presidents, but arguably out of any of the presidents, and you would just never hear him mentioned or discussed almost at all, which is really wild. I know we talk about, just modern presidents. A lot of people say, oh, Obama was so great, Biden was so great, Trump now is hailed as some winner, but I would say Polk takes all of them and just wipes them off the field in terms of lasting accomplishments. Again, these are all relatively recent ones, so we'll see, what happens. But I'm just saying it's really sad that he's kind of part of that same issue I have with Americans and just with pop culture and just how stuff gets conflated. Where you look at someone like Kennedy, who really didn't do that much, but everybody knows who he is, mostly from the whole martyred status. And then you have Polk, who successfully leads the U.S. through a war, gathers multiple states and expands the territory, sets us up to be a superpower, whose only real deficiency, like Kennedy, is in civil rights, although significantly worse than Kennedy, as he was a slave holder, whereas JFK was just kind of antithetical, just whatever. save doing something for my next term. But it's interesting how they're you have one who did so much and is remembered so little, and then one who did so little and is remembered so much. But yeah, Polk is someone I want to visit, and possibly do one of these on. It really just depends on how soon I can finish at least one of the other ones before expanding further. But I think he's a top 10 U.S. president, and he is the only president between Jackson and Lincoln that I really think people should, at the very least, have some basic familiarity with. Like, oh yeah, I know. Oh yeah, that's Polk. That's when I got us California and Texas and Oregon, and had the Mexican American War, and just little basic stuff like that should be known by more people of all ages, especially the ones that live in the states that, were it not for his tenure, we might not have today.